Welcome to the Push Ventures podcast, Push Your Advantage, and thanks a lot for tuning in. This is our first installment of the year for our Push Your Partner series of interviews. In our series of interviews, we're discussing various topics with different contributors to the African tech ecosystem. And today, our guests are a little bit switched up because we decided to change the format slightly and have all our push partners being pushed for this podcast. Our team consists of Hasit, Ush, and Sanj. And together we'll talk about what's in everyone's mouth these days, AI. Its cost, value, and application, the training data, black box, and accountability of it, then the rapid progress that we're expecting and its African context. So, with that said, let's get to it and push the team of Push. Let's talk about the first point, cost, value, and applications. This one here is for Ush, and I know all of you have been playing around with AI recently. Have you found cost-effective solutions to deploy AI, and which ones are they?
So, hey Ben. So I think overall, when ChatGPT was launched, probably I don't know 9, 12 months ago, to the general public, I think most of us kind of subscribed on the monthly $30 a month or whatever it was, and I think so. Played around with ChatGPT. I think everyone was um, kind of using it for travel scheduling and things like that. So it was very personal. It wasn't for any work related items. And then there was definitely another AI tool that I tried tested out was Midjourney. So for images and image creation, which I thought was very very good, helpful. That was another subscription. Um, but overall, I haven't really subscribe to, say, Copilot, for example, for work related development or anything within that whole Microsoft ecosystem. But I did recently subscribe to Google's AI to kind of help within email structure, restructuring of messages and things like that. But is it good? Yes. Is it helpful? Yes. Is it worth $20 to $30 a month? I'm not so sure. Not for me right now because it's all personal. But for work, maybe it could be. It could be worth it.
Sanj, how about you?
I look at AI as we're now experiencing it in three baskets. We've got the AI that was built into SaaS products, the likes of Canva. So I use Canva. We have guys in the company using Canva for design suggestions, etc. So the SaaS model is one basket. You have another basket which should be built into the larger platforms. So we use Microsoft 365 extensively across our organization. And there are things like PowerPoint. There's a bit of AI built into that, helping you generate content. And then there is things like Power BI using regression analysis, etc., to help you make predictions based on your data. And then the third one is the one that Ush touched upon, which is the LLMs, the GPT platforms that are available for free, that are available for $20 for a faster response or a more detailed response. So yeah, I think your question was cost value and application. I think we've been using them over the years. We're now seeing this generative AI hit the market with a huge bang, a bit like crypto and NFTs. In terms of cost, I think $20 is negligible. I think it's built into a lot of the engines we're already using, and therefore certainly gives value.
And Ush, since you played with quite a few, which one would you say is your favorite AI tool and why for personal or business use?
Well, I think so. I think ChatGPT, OpenAI is definitely a little bit ahead of the average, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys saw GPT 4.0 and saw what that can do. There were demonstrations of it in education, in in language translation. Even it got, I think there was a demo of an AI talking to another AI. So you can kind of see what GPT-5 and maybe 6 might end up doing. But I think I think ChatGPT is definitely ahead of the game, and it's probably the most effective overall AI tool out there.
I agree with that. In particular, as a fan of the Halo series of video games, I felt when I saw that demonstration, it was like the first real Cortana about to come upon us. So I'm eager to see how this really plays out. Hasid, what do you think about this?
Thanks, man. I'm a little like Sanj in that I've looked at AI in three buckets. Maybe my buckets are a little different. So the first bucket was your open AI, open-ended AI that you interact with. Okay. And the second bucket came all the tools which were very specific, but to help enhance something that you were doing. Okay. So an example was Grammarly or let's say, law and a couple of the other smaller kind of Synthesia was another one for videos that we started looking into, which were very specific at the time. And then that third basket, which is now AI emerging on platforms that you're already using, right? What's interesting is that the favorites have changed. I think ChatGPT initially was a favorite, but as you start using more and more AI and it gets to know you a little better, it really depends on how much time and effort you make to give AI feedback on whether the answers were accurate or not. I find that over time, some of the other tools are getting better and better. I'm relying on them a little more. So, as an example, if you were looking at um, ChatGPT to write an email for you in the past, it would be so far away from what I would normally write that I really used it. But over time, as I've started using ChatGPT for my other stuff and it's time to get to know who Hasid really is, I see the accuracy of even something as simple as an email or a document or contract drafted with a little bit of my personality in it. So certainly even today, the ones that I go to the most are ChatGPT, but the ones that I use for serious work are your Synthesias, your Grammarlys, and I use them specifically to do things within the organization, but I also specifically use them, or Canva is another one, which falls in the third basket. So I hope that answers your question.
It does indeed. And do you feel that maybe this individualization of AI is going to be something that is really going to kick off over the years? Or maybe what else do you feel is the biggest promise of AI technology for maybe the next 5 years?
Ben, it's a double-edged sword because there is serious value in training any AI engine. It also then kind of commits you to using it and makes it very difficult for you to move onto a different platform, right? So if you look at a couple of the examples that I gave you, right? Video, Synthesia, right? ChatGPT does decent video now as well, and so does Google. But Synthesia now knows the way I script things and all of that. So, back to your original question about cost, I'd rather keep spending that $20 with Synthesia than to make better use of my $20 at ChatGPT just because that technology is catching up. So definitely, I'm one of those that enjoys training just so that I see the long-term benefits of it. But the double-edged sword definitely makes me think that does it tie me to one particular model or engine long-term, and what will the future of ChatGPT be, right? Is it going to stick around 10 years from now, and will there be a model that's so good and we'll have to do everything all over again? So that's a question on my mind right now.
Ush, your thoughts on this?
So so we've been talking about a little bit of the cost, and I think something that I think Hasit and San should probably contribute here, but is like, what kind of budget would you allocate, or even how would you allocate a budget for AI in your current organizations. So how would it be thought about? Like, would it be, does it come out of the IT budget? Does it come out of a new initiative budget? Do you allow everybody in the org to have a $20 a month allowance to develop and practice and test out AI tools? Like, how would you go about thinking about this? Because some of the companies we invested in will need to do the same thing. You know, like you have a cloud budget today where you didn't have a cloud budget, 15 years ago. You have a cybersecurity budget, which you probably didn't have 25 years ago. So now, what does that mean? Do you have an AI budget line in there as well? And what does that look like? I'm curious because we talked about cost.
Sanj.
So good question, Ush. We break it down into two. We have under training an account with LinkedIn, and I think there's of the 600, 30% have access to the LinkedIn training programs and modules, of which we encourage everyone to access AI training. So there's a cost element to that. There's the access to the likes of GPT, which everyone has for free. We have probably up to middle management level, which is say 10 to 15% of the company has access to premium accounts paid for by the company. So that's the $20. However, the bigger question, maybe further down in Ben's list, is the question of data protection and the ability to control what data is going into these public LLMs, and how do you protect private data from going up. So I would say within our organization, it very much fits into IT budget, primarily because that's who secures our data.
I think that's a great point, particularly because one of the things that struck me when I saw the presentation of GPT 4.0, as they call it, was that it's going to be free, right? Which again then means that they're likely going to use whatever you put into that in order to train their data and then come out with very specific applications and sell those later on to maybe corporate customers or so on and so forth. But we all know Silicon Valley never gives you something free of charge unless they find a better use for what you give them and find a way to make money out of it. So with that being said, let's maybe look at training data and the black box of AI that it is and accountability. And Hasit, this one is for you. How do you currently train AIs in case you do? And how reliable is your existing training data for you? And how much effort is the data preparation when training that AI?
Yeah, there are two kinds of questions, right? So it's with generative AI that is open-ended. The only training you can provide currently is feedback, right? So if a generative piece of text matches 90%, most people download that text and use it, make the subtle changes and push it, right? The best way to train it is to send that text back to the thing and say, this is what you gave me, this is how I eventually sent it, and hopefully start training the AI engine, whichever one you're using, like that. Again, how many people do that? I haven't met too many who do. All right. So, but this is part of that journey that makes the AI engine far more, accurate and more reliable for you yourself, right? When you look at data, the one thing that AI has taught me in terms of some of the data that we've fed it, and so we've also played around at work with, feeding a bunch of documents to AI and saying, can you summarize all of them? Okay. And one apparent thing, which I think I mentioned to you guys in the past, is, the number of contradictions that AI picks up in our own documents is quite astonishing, right? So, things change, documents don't get updated as reliably. It would be great for AI to be able to get data from us that's reliable. And as hard as you try to keep data reliable, it's very difficult. So you almost, and I think in a way, you're gonna have to rethink AI ground up in organizations and probably end up designing the way your data is generated and stored before you start randomly just feeding it to AI. I think the concept in the world is that here's an AI engine, just give it everything and it's up and running. It's far from that. Okay, partly because the technology's still got a way to go, but also because the way that we work as humans versus the way that we need to structure information for AI engines is a little different, and there's still a gap there, which over time I believe will shorten itself out. But now, how long will that take, right? So we're thinking internally, how do you prepare data for AI use? And when we look at it, we're going very specific to departments that could use AI the most. Going back to your cost question, is I'd rather say here's an AI investment in marketing, and let's prepare marketing data for it. Okay, and I'm sure at some future point it'll become an overall budget item, like we suggested. But right now, that's how we're treating it, just so that it's clear what the investment is for, and it's clear who needs to make the effort to make good use out of AI.
Sanj, I know you have something on your mind. Why don't you share with us?
So the training of the AI is where you now go into sophisticated coding. You could have platforms that enable you to provide feedback, and the system learns, and then you're sort of now treading into machine learning as that process becomes automated. I think a typical company, and I classify us as typical, is we take existing documentation, existing sources of data, whether it's in PDFs, audio files, documents, text files, etc. We run it through one of these generative AI platforms. We've used private GPT, something that's quite easy to be deployed. You could, the listeners out there could go to medium.com, type in private GPT and get a series of 10 steps to set it up. And then you run the chatbot to query the data. If we wanted to update that data, we would just add new data into the folders and then have the engine relearn itself. Pretty much the way I think OpenAI does every couple of years for $200 million. At a small scale, at a private level, companies could do that. But just in terms of use case, in healthcare, probably a year ago, we were using AI to create training material. So we had to create, we have a healthcare service providing remote services to US physicians, and our staff need to have example cases of doctors and patients talking to each other, a consultation. So we would have GPT early version, I'm not sure, 1 whatever it was, create a fictitious conversation. We now, using the likes of Synthesia, are able to create a video of the doctor and the patient. So you essentially are able to generate training content. So I think one of the great uses of AI going forward is it's going to revolutionize the way we educate, the way we learn, and the way we train. But yeah, and in terms of data, garbage in, garbage out. So if you're, I faced an issue earlier this week where one of our data tables had field entries with a hyphen in between, a name, shadow hyphen shift as opposed to shadow shift. And that little hyphen has caused chaos because it's working across multiple tables, but not working across others. So it just involves recoding, etc. So to Hasit's point, before you get to the stage of what do we want AI to do, getting data straight is critical. We have a team of 6 that just do that.
Okay, and in your business, do you suffer from being able to implement AI due to the lack of transparency in its reasoning? Because you also mentioned something about like healthcare and its application.
Yeah, so not as AI as a tool used internally to to create, for example, the training videos? Not at all. Yeah. There's obviously the question of hallucinations. There's the question of bias built into the coding of these AI solutions. Used internally as a tool, not at all. Yeah, I don't see it having been an issue, whether it's within Canva or anybody querying GPT. As an end product, we are in my industry in what we call is now called the AI scribe wars, which is now artificial intelligence replacing humans to create medical notes. The problem is, who do you hold accountable? That's probably the second problem. The first problem is, first of all, how are those systems trained and on whose data were they trained? Um, it's not unsurprising that one of the biggest tech companies in the world buys one of the biggest repositories of code and then suddenly has the best LLM at coding. It's got the information from somewhere. Was it authorized? Was it licensed? So I think that the issue with the writers fighting for their rights a year ago is an important one. So with respect to healthcare, my particular industry, the source of data, the ownership of data is really critical. And then ultimately, if something is documented incorrectly, who do you hold accountable? At a human level, there's that full traceability. But at a technology level, how far down the line do you go? Do you blame the guy that coded? Do you go all the way down there, or do you actually go and blame the VC guy who's putting pressure on the company to create the new iterations so quickly for the sake of valuation? Where do you draw the line? So, the data protection and accountability are the big issues.
Yeah, it's similar to that question of the self-driving car, and if it actually hits somebody, who's to blame, right? Hasit, what are your thoughts on that?
Again, Ben, it's a very subjective question, that one, because the reality about the way AI gets its information and the way that humans are going to think about privacy both have to change. And I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I can definitely see. Let's say my example. I mean, I'm telling some of these engines a lot more than I would tell people, right? Just so that it can start behaving a little more like me and become useful to me, right? So at what point do I consider that information private? And an interesting conversation that I was in is when you're a needle in a haystack, you're harder to find, but you might be the black dot in a white sheet of paper, easier to find if you don't provide your information in the future, right? And that's that again, personal thought. But more specific to AI is I don't think I'm not comfortable with how easy it is to cross boundaries with AI. I'm not comfortable with um, I also don't think legislation is ever going to solve how we manage and contain AI, or if we want to contain AI. But up until it gets to a much better state, I wouldn't, for example, just hand over proprietary information to an AI engine. I won't hand over anything that we've taken years to build in terms of IP. Um, we're comfortable taking a portion of it and saying, can we enhance this? Okay, of course, I'm not in the coding space. We're just organizations that either manufacture or trade, businesses. So the only IPs that we have are formulas and things like that. But, definitely not comfortable saying to any AI engine at this stage, here's my information. What could we do better? But taking elements of it and saying, can we do this in a better way? Perhaps we're getting a little more comfortable with that. Which I would argue again, a year ago, we won't be comfortable at all because we have no idea where it's going. And we still don't.
That's a very good point. Now, Sanj, I have one more question on how you mentioned basically you're using AI right now. Who do you really hold responsible for kind of the output? Like, internally, I suppose you probably hold the respective employee accountable. And what do you feel, or what can you predict would need to change, would need to happen for that to change, for actually a machine output being held responsible? Maybe if we think where AI can go as well.
Interesting. Right now, we're governed by policies, internal policies. So as long as people adhere to those policies, we can hold accountable the individual that's using these tools. So I think regulation with respect to AI, how it's used, how the data is sourced, et cetera, may help that in that regard. But you take an example of a car, and something goes wrong with the car. Do I blame the manufacturer, or do I look at the way I've been driving it? I then take that car and I send it for repairs. Do I use the official agent, or do I use a local guy? Now, do I blame subsequent breakdown? Who do I blame? The original manufacturer? Or, there's so many elements to it. So I think ultimately each organization is going to have to stand up and be accountable for the output, regardless of the tool they've used. I don't think you could turn around and say, oh, it's not my fault, I used Claude. It's not my fault, I used Gemini. So I think responsibility, a bit like a parent, falls on you with respect to what tool you've used and the output generated and what you do with that output. And therefore, in the absence of larger government kind of regulations, it's the policies and the regulations that a corporate puts into place to govern the usage of in terms of data going into it and the data coming out.
And Hasid, what are your thoughts on who is to blame for the outputs?
I think it's a combination at this stage, Ben. We all know that AI is only as good as the input you give it anyway, right? So, back to Sanj's point, it's not so much as garbage in, garbage out, but vagueness in, and perhaps vagueness out, or vagueness in, unexpected out, right? So, I think the biggest lessons that are being taught on the web right now is how to prompt better, how to do things better with AI, how to leverage more of AI. Interesting, Sanj, that you mentioned the car accident. First, but at the end of the day, when an accident happens, it gives manufacturers an opportunity to better the model, better the brakes, add airbags, add various things to prevent death, right? So when everything is in the hands of someone that you can't physically point to, right, be it an engineer or a company or something, that's where humans find very difficult to understand how to deal with it. This is my personal perception, right? So it's going to be a while before an automated vehicle crashing is going to be viewed as, oh, here's an opportunity to learn, right? Because most humans are going to react to that is, no, humans are better. Humans are better than autonomous vehicles. Yet we all know, I mean, the four brains on this podcast know that there is no way that a human can compete with uh, the way that electronic cars are designed to communicate with each other and prevent accidents from happening way before they could even happen. Right? The concept of a car knowing 10 miles ahead that there is a pile up on a motorway is something humans just cannot do. But automated cars can. But at what point are we going to say there are more benefits to all the good stuff that has happened versus the one human life that we've lost because of AI? And I think we're gonna be so critical about certain output that AI gives versus generic output where arguably we're completely the other way. We'd happily accept what AI will tell us, even use it in our speeches, in our day-to-day lives.
I think that at what point is a very good transition also when you're thinking about what happened with GPT-4 demo, 4.0 demo, and the latest Google demo as well. Push.
I think there's two things I just wanted to say. So Tesla's FSD 12 is really remarkable. Okay, so self-driving, it stops at stop signs. It recognizes changes in traffic lights. It recognizes cones in the road. It recognizes people, cyclists, trucks versus cars versus probably horse and cart. I don't know, but the beauty of it is that it probably felt to me 85% safe versus the old version, which felt maybe 40% safe. So, fast forward another year, 18 months, 24 months, it's only going to be better. Now, hypothetically, if you think about if most of the cars in the city are is a connected car, or is a Tesla, or any of these cars that are talking to each other, then the number of accidents should be near zero, because they're all traveling at the right speed level. The distances between each car will be set in a safety parameter, etc. So in theory, it should be better. And I think the comment about the garbage in, garbage out, I think we're kind of graduating from that after seeing what GPT-4o does, because you're seeing reasoning and you're seeing inference, because it's like if you have a look at that one with Sal Khan and I think it was his son, they were trying to solve a math problem. Like, it was, Sal Khan was prompting all these, don't tell him the answer, just explain the first step to do, and then he can work out the rest. And it's like, that's reasoning. Whereas in GPT-3, you'd prompt the question and it will give you the answer. So it's like, here you're asking it not to give you all the details. So now fast forward to GPT-5, it's going to be a conversation between a full teacher and a kid, in theory. So GPT-10 will be just a conversation to just random air, and you just say, hey, I need this, and it just gives you you have a logical conversation with them. I think the quality is getting better.
Yeah,
and
I believe so as well.
I was going to say, if you guys, I think, Sanj, I think you said you were thinking about building a localized or private LLM, and you had built some internal tools. I think it's definitely worth looking at, like, cleaning up the data. That whole audit process is pretty important for you guys if you are building stuff internally yourself, and private, like what is it? I guess it's called a small language model, maybe something like that.
Yeah, so it's offline. It has the intelligence of the larger model, but it runs localized of your data. So that's really where I came from in terms of the garbage in, garbage out. It's how you use it with respect to your own data.
And I think Ush, you also made like an interesting point with that explanation with Sal Khan of Khan Academy. I think it was him, right? When you're saying like that step-by-step explanation will also be maybe the first door towards clearing up that black box and allowing more accountability of what's really happening in the reasoning process of the AI. How does it arrive at conclusions and results, and depending on different prompts. But with that being said, let's maybe move to the next point of that rapid progress, which is particularly interesting given the GPT-4o demonstration the other day, as well as the Google AI demonstration. And let's think a bit about the African context. Bush, what part of the rapid progress we've seen so far astonished you most? I mean, you already said something about the Sal Khan demo part of it, but what really kind of maybe kicked you off the chair?
I personally, so I think everybody listening to this should definitely watch the Google I/O presentation, and it shows you what is going to be coming. Everyone else should also watch all the videos that are out there in terms of demos for GPT 4.0. And then there's one more, which is Jensen Huang of NVIDIA. He had his annual I think it's called GTC or something, in March, the annual event, and he walks through what is happening at the hardware chip level. So they've got this new platform called Blackwell, and how that is going to change, drug discovery and education and everywhere else, and the data center itself, and some of the problems they're going to be facing in that sense. So in terms of power and cooling and things like that. But these guys, NVIDIA is probably 5 years ahead of everybody else in terms of the chips, and they're really hard to find. So now who's going to win are the people who can afford these, $20, $30, $40,000 chips. They're going to need tens of thousands of them, maybe some of these big organizations, maybe more, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So who will eventually win in the AI race is potentially all the big companies. So that's a different conversation. I think in terms of what do I think will happen over the next few years? I think everybody will have some form of voice assistant of some sort, helping them with everything in their day-to-day work, private, whatever it might be. You're deciding whether to wear a red shirt or a blue shirt. The AI assistant will say, well, you wore a blue shirt 2 days in a row, so why don't you wear the red shirt? Right? Just, I think it's going to be helpful as long as people see it that way. I don't know where, Sanj, Hasit, where you guys see it helping you guys, professionally or privately.
10 years ago, a well-known billionaire had his very own virtual personal assistant called Jarvis. And from Iron Man to the rest of us, right? 7 billion people will get access, if they want, to some form of digital assistant. So I think in terms of progress, Ben, it's the rate of, maybe 10, 12 years ago, out comes the big screen mobile, the smartphone, and changes our lives. We're at that moment now. We just don't understand where this moment will lead us. Maybe hence more of these kind of conversations needed. But the rate of improvement, I can see certain elements. If you look at GPT 4.0, they've now combined the voice to text, the AI intelligence, and then the text back to voice. So it's taking multiple elements from multiple different fields of AI and putting it all together. So I think what's exciting is what's it all going to look like. I think, certain industries and certain jobs are going to struggle. But as an individual user, I look forward to what we experience. I don't know whether any of you guys have come across a product called Frames by a Singapore company called Brilliant Labs. So essentially, it's a pair of spectacles, and it enables you to connect to any LLM of your choice so that you can query it and get response back. So it's kind of evolving further. I think Ush touched upon the hardware, the real hardware, the chips. But in terms of consumer facing, you've got the Meta glasses and et cetera, et cetera. So the accessibility is becoming more obvious, it's more available, and then the putting together of the different tech. In the African context, I think, Ben, was that part of the question?
Not yet, but you can tell us what your thoughts are.
I thought the question was progress with respect to the African context. But so as you know, I was there just last week, Cape Town, Nairobi, a little bit up country, and there's a stark contrast between conversations. I think the conversations and the experiences Ush has living in the valley are different from the ones I have sitting here in Bangalore, India, which is a country desperate to become the number one country. It's got huge excitement and interest in technology, etc., etc. And then you've got Kenya and South Africa, the two bits that I experienced. And I'm not saying Africa as a whole is the same, but it has its own issues. It has its own nuances. There was no conversation as such on AI. Nothing socially. I didn't experience it in Cape Town. Didn't anybody we engaged with or communicated with. It wasn't really a topic. I've been back here a week, and it's popped up in every single conversation I've had. So I'm not sure. I think it's still very, very early days. Very, very early days to see. No matter how rapid the progress is here, it's extremely early for Africa.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think there's interesting points already to note, like what Ush said about the self-driving and how it advanced, for example. If you're looking at that, that's also a question of the respective context that you're in, because self-driving, I think, in India would be different compared to self-driving in America or in Germany, for example, because in Germany, at a stop sign, yes, technically you're meant to stop, but nobody really stops. And the rule is slightly different to America, where you, I think, have to stop and then you're allowed to go, and the stop sign is on every side of the crossing, which is not the case in Germany, for example. So that, I think, localization becomes interesting. But what I also feel is very interesting, in particular with this latest generation that has just been demoed to us, is as we rightfully said before, prompt engineering, or how do you prompt your AI, is very important. And with this new generation, the interesting part I feel is that it's becoming more humane in the sense of the voice commands, and the voice prompts are easily understood and then responded to, as well as I think on Google has showcased this as well, when you're just holding your camera and then you're interacting with a live video feed and the AI is giving you some information back and you can interact with the AI there. And I think that's going to be a big selling point of AIs, when you're basically making it extremely easy for people to interact with that. Ush, you have a thought on this?
I think for Africa, you know, it's going to be interesting, even though you're not having it in daily conversation. But I think, and Hasit, you can probably give an opinion here, where whoever adopts it, do you think they'll have a bigger advantage over some of the other corporations out there? Like, so, I'm thinking just even from a person who lives up north, barely speaks any English, and uses some kind of translation device to start negotiating prices for product that they're selling up north. I'm kind of just thinking through, like, ways people's lives could improve and get better, and opportunities could arise. But even from a large scale corporation, being a leader in AI, could they bring efficiencies, maybe some additional margin, even, who knows, like just by deploying some AI that gives you 20-30% extra productivity.
I mean, it's an interesting point. My personal opinion on Africa, like Sanj says, is that not a lot of corporates are talking about it for internal usage. There are conversations, of course, lots of them. Okay. My personal opinion with AI is it's gonna, like you said, start leveling the play field. Africa is gonna leapfrog. It always does. So Africa is never where the first technology comes in. Africa, when eventually Africa wakes up, it leapfrogs and puts in the latest version. And what does that mean? I think Africa's got a big opportunity. Lack of data is the biggest challenge that we have here. Even as business people, it's very hard to find credible data about your industry, about market size, XYZ. So if Africa wakes up to this with an opportunity mindset, then it would start organizing its data, and people start organizing their information with a view to take full advantage of, where ChatGPT or other AI engines go 5 years from now. Okay, so that's one opportunity. The other one is, when I say level the playing field, it is a $20 a month teacher to someone who currently has to pay a lot of money to get any kind of knowledge, right? It's It's a resource that can provide a ton of ideas to a wannabe entrepreneur, which is hard to get by in Africa unless you have a mentor or you have access to someone who can guide you and take you there. So, it is the missing things that a mature economy has can be easily replaced with the knowledge that AI brings, because it's not specific knowledge or it's not local knowledge, it's worldwide knowledge, right? So there's the opportunity. All right. The other thing, which I feel we miss is I'm not sure we should be giving opinions around how we're gonna look at accidents and how we're gonna look at our information. The whole privacy thing, every generation that comes in, our kids are using, Siri and Google or even Alexa or Amazon in a very different way too. We will once in a while dabble with it, but for them it's natural, right? And I think 2 generations from now, AI will be so natural to that generation. They won't know a life without it, right? They won't have a comparative like we do, right? So, um, and the more powerful question becomes, how will AI influence the next generations to make AI more acceptable in their lives? And I think that's because if ChatGPT 4.0 is teaching someone quadratics, okay, then it could teach someone quadratics in a way that makes them feel the love that a child would feel towards a teacher, right? Which we all know our kids have a different relationship with teachers than they do with parents, right? So, is ChatGPT going to become the influencer in the world? Of course it is. And that's the scary part for those of you who are glass half full people, half empty people, and it's a huge opportunity if you're a glass half full people, right? So I think psychologists are going to be the right people to ask, but how are the next generations who are born in a world of AI gonna use it?
I think that's a good point for the next question when it comes to the next generation, as well as the glass half full thought of it. And maybe, but from each of you, and we start with Ush, just in a one sentence, the question that is often asked is, will it destroy a lot of jobs? What will it do to productivity? And I think we're already seeing interesting aspects coming out of that. And we've already touched upon it slightly. But in one sentence, Ush, what is your take? How do you truly feel about what AI will do for us as well as the next generation?
I think so. In terms of productivity, we should see a individual productivity boost, and I think new jobs will be created, but there will be a lot of redundancy in the current roles we understand are out there.
And Sanj, your take on that? I know we've already discussed that we felt much more confident coders despite not being proper coders using AI.
So yeah, I'm a coder today. I'm sure all four of us could be coders today. I think for sure productivity up, but I think that'll be up for a few. And I agree with Ush. There will be not more jobs or newer type of jobs created, but I think net job destruction.
And Hasit, one quick thought from you.
Yeah, I also feel that the productivity is going to be a lot better, which may make people redundant. Okay, so I foresee a lot of job losses. What from a structured answer to this is the rate at which AI is adapting and taking over and adding value is far higher than what humans are going to have to do to pivot to different vocations or different skill sets. And that gap is always going to be getting larger and larger and larger because our education system is like that. We still learn, it still takes us 16 years to learn um, to a level where we're allowed to start working. And while AI can bring that down, humanly, we're not going to develop fast enough. So I feel that the job losses will definitely be a reality. How we as humans react to that and pivot is going to be too slow, and so there will be a net element of always um, an old generation that just doesn't know what to do, but embrace AI and quickly try and pivot. Okay, as the generations go by, I think it'll become faster and faster. It will now be expected that you'll be in a new career, maybe even every year, right? So depending on how they're brought up, right? But certainly our generation, the next two generations, we're not here to change careers every time technology gets better. But I think that's the future of a world with AI getting better. Is how quickly do you keep changing?
And Hasid, what do you think currently about the conversations government has around AI?
Ooh, in Kenya specifically,
No,
with
just any government. You can maybe Kenyan, maybe European. I mean, European, I know they always like to talk about things they don't understand very quickly.
I, you know, it with Africa and this continent, it's always about how many people in government fully understand and comprehend the capability. Okay, and are they the decision makers? So the decision making is too person specific in Africa, and the decisions are not always made with the country in mind. Okay, so from that perspective, uh, again, I think in countries like in countries within Africa, the AI is going to be problem. It's going to be disruption at corporate level, it's going to be disruption at individual level, and not necessarily so much disruption at government level. And if there is, it'll be in the way that they roll out services and they manage the information. And that I think is going to go back to my example. Someone's going to wake up and say, look, we just cannot carry on um, until we get this kind of technology. How much of that is a conversation like what could we use technology in government today for? I don't think that's a conversation that's happening, and I'm not seeing it for sure. And we interact with government quite a bit. So that's my short answer.
And Ush, your take on this?
Look, I think history has proven that the Europeans generally kind of lead this from a regulatory perspective, and then the Americans generally, follow and adopt. But I think the problem, like the rate of change we're seeing in just 1 year, like regulation will come in and it may be outdated within 24 months. And regulation usually takes 24 months to get into place and approved. So it may be obsolete by the time it reaches whoever's desk to sign off on. So I think, and then the other point that Hasit made is the people writing this stuff, are often a little bit outdated in terms of age or just capacity to understand what this really is about. So I think we may not have proper regulation for a while, and I think, like as it said, bottom up, the private sector will just go ahead and release, and until something breaks, it's just unfortunate.
Okay, now last question, and we'll start with Hasid. And please, again, answer in one sentence. Where would you like to see AI solve Africa-specific problems or challenges?
I would like AI to bring more accountability in the African context. So allow people to, allow AI to help us rate people in government, allow AI to help us rate corporations, allow people to rate individuals in their jobs so that we can expose and create more accountability in the country.
And Sanj, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd follow on. I think it could achieve greater transparency. If the inputs in and all the data is what it should be, then it should be accessible by all, and therefore greater transparency. And I think to touch upon a point Hasit made earlier is it will enable African countries to catch up with other countries that are further developed from around the world, because when they do enter, they enter with greater tech, newer tech, etc. But I foresee one problem, one big problem. It's the youngest population. The continent has the youngest population in the world, and as you build in automation, I worry for that populace. So yeah, transparent, catch up, problem coming.
And Ush?
Yeah, I don't have a lot more to add to what they both said, but I think the comment about what will some of that younger generation do is I think is a question and a problem for a lot of countries, and I know there were some social experiments of universal basic income, but I guess wealthy countries which have a surplus of some sort or unlimited supply of government money can afford to do that, but normal countries can. So that could have its own social and political problems too.
So thank you, everyone. I will now try and create a brief summary of what we've spoke about. The first point I made was that will one AI actually become your go-to? Will there be a proper lock-in effect? That's one of the thoughts that we had voiced. Then when it comes to the business perspective of the money being spent and where it's budgeted, it will create those questions from a business perspective, knowing what cost you put in, what value do you gain, which is something we'll figure out over time, likely. The other question then is when you're now having products that are external facing, who's responsible for that? And we believe that there's policies and regulation with respect to AI, which will be coming and which will be difficult because Hasit pointed out that it's difficult to point the finger at non-physical entities or the aspect of giving an AI proprietary information. We feel that generally rapid advancements of AI are making them better and better and are leveling the playing field, which will mean it's becoming an individual productivity booster, allowing in particular our continent here to leapfrog ahead if we make use of that opportunity. And in the last question that I asked and that we spoke about, we said that creating greater accountability and transparency for African countries is something that AI could really potentially do and enable us to really catch up. But the worry is that we still have the youngest population on the continent, and as that AI disruption potentially eradicates a lot of jobs, the question is, what will these people do? Anything to add from your perspective, Team Push? All good. So then, thanks a lot for all of you listening, and you can find our presence on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook as Push Venture Capital, and on X as Push Your Advantage. We'll be back next month with another podcast on the African tech ecosystem, and it's available on Spotify, Apple Music, AfriPods, and of course, YouTube.